Is your PC ready for Resident Evil 9? Let's find out whether your system can actually run it, and what you can realistically expect before you hit launch day.
6 survivors of Raccoon City, all dead from the same thing.
Yeah, that's not good. Victor purchased a building after Umbrella went under. The Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center.
So in this latest installment, officially titled Resident Evil Requiem, we're back in the same dark horror universe that Capcom's built over decades. The game puts you front and center with classic series protagonist Leon S. Kennedy, taking on terrifying new threats in a story that blends strategic survival with cinematic action, but also with a new protagonist, Grace Ashcroft, an FBI intelligence analyst, and the daughter of Resident Evil Outbreak character, Alyssa Ashcroft.
Why me?
From the trailers, the settings look dense, atmospheric, tighter environments, more dynamic lighting, detailed character models, and visual effects that will push modern hardware harder than past entries. This isn't just another horror sequel. It's designed to look and feel next gen, particularly on PC where effects like path tracing, ray tracing, and upscale tech is officially supported. Resident Evil Requiem uses Capcom's RE engine, the same core tech that powered Resident Evil 4 the remake and every major entry since Resident Evil 7. But this is the first mainline game in the series to include native path tracing support on PC, meaning ray trace lighting, ray trace shadows, ray trace reflections, and ray trace ambient occlusion. That also comes with more realistic hair and material rendering. This level of advanced lighting is a significant visual upgrade compared to Resident Evil 4 the remake, and makes the scenes much richer, but also more demanding on hardware. So let's take a look at hardware requirements, starting with Resident Evil 4 the remake. That had a minimal CPU of a Ryzen 3 1200 and an i5 7500, 8GB of RAM, and a GPU 1050 Ti or an RX 560. Moving on to the recommended hardware, you wanted a Ryzen 5 3600 or an i7 8700, 16GB of RAM, and for the GPU a 1070 or RX 5700, both at 8GB of VRAM. Now here's Resident Evil 9 Requiem. For minimal specs, we're looking at the i5 8500 or the Ryzen 5 3500, RAM is at 16GB, and for a GPU you're looking at a 1660 or an RX 5500 XT. Stepping up to recommended, you want an i7 8700 or a Ryzen 5 5500, 16GB of RAM, and for a GPU, RTX 2060 Super or an RX 6600, both at 8GB of VRAM. Now this is where it gets interesting. Compared to Resident Evil 4 the remake, Requiem's minimal RAM doubles from 8GB to 16GB, the minimal GPU class jumps from a 1050 Ti to a 1660, and the recommended GPU moves up from a 1070 to a 2060 Super. That means the baseline level hardware is significantly increased, especially if you're targeting smoother gameplay or higher settings. In real world terms, that's roughly a GPU performance class uplift of 30 to 50% from the recommended spec of RE4 the remake to the recommended spec of RE9, plus a much heavier reliance on VRAM and lighting. So what do we realistically expect? If your machine easily handled Resident Evil 4 on high settings with 16GB of RAM and an 8GB GPU, you might run Resident Evil 9 at similar settings too. But if you're looking to enable path tracing or ray tracing, enabling those shadows and lightings to max, you can expect 8GB GPUs to struggle. In my recent video over here somewhere for 8GB GPUs in 2026, I actually used Resident Evil 4 the remake as an example. When you're running at low settings, you were typically around 6GB of VRAM, but if you were running at max at 1440p, that jumped to 12GB plus. Now, the RE engine is typically very forgiving. This isn't a 4090, 5090 only game, but it is more demanding visually than anything else in the series before it. So this is where I land on it before launch. You want to make sure that you're rocking at least 16GB of RAM. You want an 8GB VRAM GPU if you're aiming for 1080p to 1440p, but expect some tweaks on the settings. If you want higher fidelity, ray tracing, path tracing, you want GPUs higher than that tier. You're talking 4080 and above. And if you're on older 4 to 6 year old hardware, focus on quality to FPS tweaks rather than panic upgrades. You don't need the latest flagship GPU to play this game, and in my experience, low can actually still look really great, so there's a lot of room for improvement when you're actually tailing down these settings. The difference between high and ultra is often undistinguishable. You just need realistic expectations based on what your GPU and CPU can actually deliver. Now, post-launch, I'll be doing real benchmarks, RAM and VRAM usage breakdowns, and looking at some of the recommended settings. I won't be doing a review of the game, but I will share some of my opinions and where the graphic fidelity and performance matters. So if you're running on PC, comment what you're running for your GPU and RAM and CPU, and if you're playing on console, let me know what platform you're aiming for. Let's make sure you're ready for Resident Evil 9 without wasting money. Now you can see some of my recommended hardware in the description below, and if this has helped you in any way, drop a like and subscribe.